A lot sort of from nature, or just like even from materials. Like a woman gave me this sort of beveled cedar siding, and I wanted to figure something to do with it. So I kept thinking about it for a while, and that I ended up designing this roof. A lot of the crooked houses, I just kind of start as just by taking an idea of a house, and imagine if some force came and somehow affected the house. So if this house was just, for example, was made out of some kind of bendable material, and it started melting, I just sort of imagine, that's what would happen there. And the windy house, obviously the windy house is like if a lot of wind came along and just kind of twisted it in that formation. And the other crooked house is called the crunchy house. So in my mind, I imagined a giant coming and stepping on the house and breaking it, and that's how the house ended up looking. So that's kind of like how I came up with all those crooked houses. A girl told me it was like last week or something. It's like, it's funny that, if it was made out of something else like ceramic, you wouldn't think of anything like it, but because it's made out of wood, everybody has in their head that wood should be, a straight material or something. Everything should be straight and, 90 degrees and 45 degrees. And so on a lot of these, you almost have to retrain your brain to like make these shingles all out of line, because in building trades you're taught everything needs to be level and plumb and straight and square. But I'm not doing anything that way. I want it to look just the opposite, like it was broken and something is amiss. It shouldn't be like that. But it should be like that. Yes, so all the houses are completely functional birdhouses. When I first started building the birdhouses, I didn't really know a lot about them. And apparently, a lot of people, not everyone, because there is some controversy on the subject, was whether you need to clean out the birdhouses yearly or seasonally or not. So at first I was just doing like a copper ring around there, like a predator guard, and I wasn't really giving an easy clean out for any of the houses. And after I started doing some shows, a lot of the serious bird ladies would come up and they would almost get angry with me because there was no way to get in there and clean out their old nesting material. So after thinking about it, I came up with these sort of removable little doors. So underneath the door is a little archway, which this could be pulled out and cleaned out either by kitchen tongs or by reaching your hand in there and removing the material. Actually, I did, before I came up with the idea for the doors, one gentleman had me make this model here with little sort of suitcase clips, stainless steel suitcase clips to unhitch. And so he could take the whole roof off. And he wanted to put it 10 feet high in the air and do that somehow. He had a plan. I don't know if he has a fire truck or what his plan was, but we made it, and hopefully it's up and it's working for him.
So how long does the average house take to make?
Yeah, I could point. Yeah, so a house like this would probably, if I just did one from start to finish, it would probably take maybe 3/4 of a day's work. A bigger one like this is maybe a day and a half. But those are the ones that I already have the designs for and the patterns. So if I'm starting a new design or trying something new, obviously it's going to take longer because there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of coming and looking and sort of trying to figure things out and tweaking things and all that. Whereas if I have all the patterns and I remember to make all the patterns and where they are and to keep them, I can just go back to that and look it up and trace it and go from there. So it's quite a variation of time, but it is quite a lot of time. And so the little shingles on the crooked ones actually came when I first started building. I was building more designs like this. I was just using general shingles from a box. Most of them come from Canada, white cedar, red cedar, that type of thing. And I'd have so many cutoffs because there was so much waste, and I couldn't stand it. And I wanted to use it, and I just kept putting it in the fire, in the wood stove, and it was such a shame. So I wanted to use them up, so I started doing the little houses like this with the small ends of the shingles and whatnot. But at some point, I ended up running out of them, so then I had to actually make a jig and start cutting the actual shingles from scratch. And as I started doing that, I had sort of like red cedar and different types of wood, and I sort of mixed and matched them, cypress and all kinds of woods like that. Any sort of like exterior wood, I would cut into a little shingle and put it on there. And even the gray, all that gray, the gray shingle material is a woman gave me 2 boxes of shingles, and at first I started sanding off all the gray paint, and I said, just for the heck of it, I'm gonna try to leave the paint on there, and I kind of liked the way the gray looked, kind of looked neat. And then I seal all of the houses with an exterior sealant after they're finished. And it's an oil-based sealer, which sort of brings out the grain of all the wood. And it does, offer quite a bit of preservative for the houses. Of course, it doesn't last forever. They're going to gray through the sealer, but it's sort of it does delay that process, the graying process, the weathering process of the wood a little bit. So I started with the birdhouses maybe, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. It started from, like I was telling you, my uncle had me build him a couple of nice birdhouses. He had a few bigger birdhouses, and I'm not the guy that came up with the idea of building birdhouses. People have been doing it, for a while. But so I kind of looked at what he had and kind of copied, and kind of then did my own sort of version of what he was doing, and so from there, for my uncle's house, he had a neighbor lady or a woman that lived in town in Rehoboth where he lives, that came up to him and asked him, "Where'd you get these?" And of course he said, "Oh, just call my nephew. He'll make you whatever you want." And, so she did. She just kept ordering. She must have about 8 of them. And most of them are all big. This is hers right here.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. She,
Bird condo.
yeah. So she had me build this for her. She wanted something with a copper roof. And I had this ready probably about a month ago or so. And I called her, and she said she's not ready for it because she wants it in a hosta garden. And the hostas are too big, and she doesn't want them all trampled. So she said, just keep that and put that in your exhibit, and because it's a really neat piece. So yeah, that one's really heavy. But most of hers are very big, dramatic birdhouses like that. And everyone has a garden designed around the birdhouse. Yeah. Well, she has her own guy that does all her gardening and work for her. It's a 3-legged table. The table was pretty much only designed to hold my little cards here. But a fun fact about the wood from the table, the tree that the wood was cut from, or the lumber came from, was originally growing on the breakers in Newport. So it's a cypress. It's an American cypress, which isn't a native tree to this area. It's more of a southern tree, but it will grow. So a lot of those gardens out there and those mansions, they do a lot of Oriental Asian gardens that, these cypresses and cedar trees were planted, 100 plus years ago. And at some point, they get cut down, and it's neat if you could, find something cool to do with them, like that. That's a cedar slab there. I think that might be a Japanese cedar. That's from the same person. He has a little sawmill in Rhode Island, and I thought it's kind of neat to make something with it. It has a little bit of a story behind it. That the tree was originally part of an estate or a garden, and now it's either a table or a little slab to hold birdhouses or something like that. Yeah, and all these little nesting boxes. I've only started making these probably this year really, in an effort to when I do a lot of the fairs and craft shows. A lot of my pieces are, little. They start around $300, and a lot of people just, if they're looking for a gift or something, that's a little bit steep for that. And a lot of people can't really wrap their head around, if they don't have the big yard or whatever, what they would do with this. So I needed a lower priced item, and I was thought, and I just didn't want to do a standard bluebird nesting box or anything. So I kind of took the dimensions, the standard dimensions, and I just designed it so sort of coming off of these designs, but a much simpler thing, right, which I can sell for less money. And a lot of this wood too is we were just talking about reusing materials and reclaimed materials. This is all Western red cedar that was stored in somebody's basement for God knows how many years, 30, 40 years. It was all dirty. A woman gave it to me, a pile of it, a giant pile of it. And she said, this was my dad's, and it'd be great if you could make something really neat with it. But the Western red cedar, and it's all old growth Western red cedar, it's getting really hard to get. So hopefully somebody will buy the birdhouses and have them for a long time and enjoy them.
And I noticed the openings are different sizes. Are they for
Yes.
different birds?
Yes, so these two are bluebird nesting boxes, and the dimensions are, roughly what they suggest, because people do serious studies on all these different birds and stuff. So a lot of statistics and all this stuff of which, what type of house they prefer, and this is what they come up with. And the elongated hole, a guy named Peterson, it's called the Peterson house, started making it that way. And then there's a little sort of predator garden there, so it's a little bit harder for the bigger birds to get in there. This is a wren house for the smaller birds, the wrens, the chickadees, the finches, the goldfinches. So it's 1.25 inch hole, which is the perfect size for them to go in there, and it keeps all the larger birds out, the predator birds, the sparrows, and the stuff that would want to get in there and try to hurt them or steal their eggs or eat them or whatever. So they would feel fairly safe in there, hopefully. Yeah, so the logo was designed by my cousin. She has a graphic arts company in North Carolina, and it's just a little wood stamp. So she designed the logo, I sent away, and so I stamp all my my houses with a little brand. So it's an original Eric's Aviaries if it has that brand.
Maybe we could just talk about the library being open Monday and Thursday 9 until 8, and Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday 9 until 5. So if anybody would like to come in and see these gorgeous pieces in person, they'd be welcome to come in.
And the prices are on them now.
Are these ones that have multiple entries?
Oh, yes.
Inside?
Yes, that's a good question. So they're all divided. So they're not one large chamber. So generally on the bigger houses, the type of birds that'll go in there, they call colony nesters.
Okay.
So a lot of sparrows, starlings, and those are pretty typical. But also, of course, wrens and chickadees, bluebirds. Definitely had bluebirds in the bigger houses. Even though those are specific bluebird boxes, you know, the bluebird doesn't know that.
True.
The bluebird wants to make a house in there, he's gonna.
Do you ever have them in places where you find multiple species housing in the same?
Some of my customers have said that.
Really?
They've had, with the bigger houses, they've had a couple different species. I think like a sparrow and a wren in the same. I'm not sure exactly which ones they were. But sometimes, you know, there's a lot of dynamics with the birds. Like some of them are, you know, more aggressive to other ones and that type of thing. Yeah, that has happened, I believe. Well, at least according to them. I've never actually seen it. I'm just going by their words. Zero background, besides just looking at them and that type of thing. My background is in woodworking. So most of my life I was actually a chef. That's where my schooling was and my training. And I worked probably 20 years in that industry. And after a while, it got a little much with family life and that, so I decided I'd like to do woodworking, and I met Paul Gerard, who owns Fine Lines in Sturbridge, and he gave me a job at his cabinet shop and building kitchens and all kinds of cabinetry and built-ins and things like that. And so then this sort of just kind of happened organically. It wasn't something I set out to do or had a plan on. It was just something that happened, and I enjoy it. I enjoy designing the houses and building the houses and talking to people about the houses and all of it.
Tucked in the corner is that gorgeous lighthouse. Can we go over and have a look?
Of course you can.
Yeah.
So we just checked the solar, so it might be picking up some light from the window, enough to make the little light, the beacon work.
Oh, cool.
So it's just basically a solar light, fairy light. And so sure, we can talk about this. So the majority of this, the actual tower is made out of Alaskan yellow cedar, which is a very durable wood. Ironically, most of it doesn't even grow in Alaska. It comes from British Columbia. But anyway, it's a really nice wood. It has a copper roof. Yes, that is a doorknob of the top finial up there. And this is a cabinet knob. But it works and it does the job. So in the actual beacon part, there's 3 nesting chambers that you can access by removing the little compass roses and getting in there to clean them out if you need to. So there's 3 chambers. There's 2 on the lower portion with a division here, and there's 1 on the upper portion. And the keeper's cottage has, it's basically a wren house because it's an 1.25 inch opening. But this house is a little more expensive. It's quite a hard build. These are all compound angles. It has to be all glued up. And this has to be, the keeper's cottage has to be scribed into the actual tower. All the copper has to be cut into the tower to prevent, make sure the water runs off correctly. And so that one's a tough build. And I forgot how hard it was till I started. I did 2 of these like 2 months ago, and I was like, oh, I forgot how tough that one was. I did 2 at once, but it took me the bulk of a week to make those 2. So it took a while. Yeah, I look at a lot of architecture, but I'm not in particular. I'm not going by certain architects or whatever. Of course, there's a lot of Asian influence in that sun house there. Oops, my thing. And this one is Margaret actually noticed this the shingles is kind of mocked off of a white oak leaf, which was quite an observation because nobody ever caught that before. So,
What?
a white oak leaf.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and they all have names, so I name all of them. A lot of them have to, you know, I just kind of go by the look of it. I call that the pine cone. The sunflower, I think because it was growing by my sunflowers. I call this the lighthouse. I don't know where that came from. So the windy house, because like we talked before, it reminded me, the wind came really strong wind and knocked, you know, kind of warped it over. That house right there I call the swallowtail, because the bottom sort of mocks the swallowtail.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at a lot of the European castles, they have the parapets where they, you know, of course it would be inverted the other way, where they would have the weaponry faced out for the invaders and stuff. So I kind of took that and thought it'd be neat if I flipped it around and made the actual base out of that. This one I call the crunchy house. That's the sway back barn. The Asian looking one is the sun house. The kind of one that goes like that I call the Gumby house because it reminded me of Gumby, the old TV guy. And the little one by him is the hemlock because it's a smaller version of the pine cone. And the hemlock cone is a smaller cone than the pine cone.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. This is wonderful. And
Oh, thank you very much
I'm
for
sure people
having
will
us
want to
do this.
chat and stuff. So
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you, Margaret.